There is a certain kind of smile which only exists in worlds built on suffering. A smile that's bright on the surface, but truly brittle beneath. It's warm, yet devastatingly hollow, designed to mask the absence of joy. When we first meet Nami, she wears that very smile as if it's armor to protect herself. She's a clever, mischievous, and cunning girl. She possesses all the traits you'd expect from a brilliant thief, as she steals from pirates with a reckless grace. She darts between shadows and sunlight, charming and deceiving those she wants something from with ease. Her laugh is sharp, her wit is quick, and the smile she flaunts is a blatant lie. The truth is behind the misdirects, a truth carved into her skin, branded on her shoulder, and etched into every choice she has made since childhood. Nami was coerced into thievery because she was enslaved, not because she was consumed by temptation or greed. She smiles because the only alternative is to break down on the spot. To understand the depth of Nami's character and the brilliance of Oda's storytelling, we have to peel back the false smile layer by layer. And in doing so, we uncover a story of heroism, adventure, and the liberation of a girl trapped by the world's cruelty, and freed by an unlikely, rubber-bodied boy who doesn't take too kindly to injustice. This is a story of how Luffy liberated Nami from both the physical obstacle in Arlong, as well as the mental roadblock in hopelessness itself. And in that act, he changed the course of her life and the destiny of the entire pirate world. When Nami first appears in the manga, one of the strongest first impressions she makes is that she despises pirates. She tricks Luffy, steals from Buggy, and outruns all the chaos, navigating storms as if her body is attuned to the sea itself. She quickly established herself as someone effortlessly competent, charming, and someone that's in control. Or at least she initially appears that way, because the brilliance of Oda's writing is that everything Nami does in these early chapters, every theft, every lie, every smile, is textbook survival behavior. Nami is not an inherently greedy, conniving, or manipulative person. Those are the traits she performs, done to hide the truth that Nami does not hate every pirate, but she despises Arlong with every bone in her body. And more specifically, she detests the world for having allowed Arlong to own her and her villagers' lives like property in the first place. In order to truly understand Nami, we have to go back 8 years, to the day her life changed forever. She was a child, drawing maps in a small village with dreams wider than the horizon itself. A little girl who looked at the world with boundless curiosity in place of a fear of the unknown. She wanted to see every ocean, every island, every hidden corner of the globe. A dream cultivated by pure childish wonder. This talent was recognized and encouraged by Bellamere, who never doubted her daughter's ambition or her ability. However, Bellamere's encouragement existed within the constraints of material scarcity. Kokuyashi village did not have the luxury of excess, and Bellamere's primary concern was survival. Food, shelter, and stability took precedence over specialized tools and books. Tangerines had to be grown, harvested, and sold. Profit had to be turned slowly, carefully. Foods had to be planned. There was never excess. Bellamere routinely chose not to eat so that her daughters could. Clothes were handed down, nothing was wasted. Love, however, was abundant. Nami did not yet understand this. She did not like hand-me-downs. She wanted new things, books, tools, navigation texts that she couldn't afford. When she couldn't buy them, she stole them. She did not see that Bellamere had a hidden stash, saved carefully, intended for moments like this, intended one day to buy Nami a book. She did not understand that Bellamere's attention was often on the tangerines because those trees were the difference between hunger and stability. This misunderstanding became the fault line of their conflict. Nami, frustrated and hurt, began to believe that Bellamere would be better off financially without her daughters. She internalized scarcity as personal failure. In that state, she said the cruelest thing she could think of, that Nojiko wasn't even her real sister, because they weren't related by blood. She went further, wishing aloud that she had been found by a rich family instead. Those harsh words, however, were spoken from a childish logic, since Nami believed money equals safety. If Bellamere struggled because of them, then perhaps love itself was the problem. Bellamere was hurt, deeply, and she reacted emotionally. She said she didn't care where Nami went. Words that were transparently untrue, but spoken from pain, and neither of them had the time to mend them. Arlong arrived before apologies could. Almost immediately, Bellamere regretted it. She intended to bring Nami home, to cook a proper meal, to apologize. And that night, unaware of what was approaching, she did exactly that. She spared no expense. Duck, vegetables, rice, even sake. A rare, generous meal. An act of love offered freely, and not frugally this time. The tragedy is that Bellamere never withheld her affection. She gave it fully, right before it was taken. Arlong represents both brutal domination and the world that permits it. Bellamere navigated scarcity with care, but Arlong wielded his abundance of resources as his power. He demanded money for survival. Bellamere understood the stakes immediately. Her arm was crushed. She knew she would die. And yet, even then, she thought only of Nojiko and Nami. The girls did not understand the situation. They only heard that, because they were poor, they could no longer be her children. That is what Nami heard, that poverty disqualifies love. Bellamere refused that premise outright. She declared that the 100,000 berries were for her daughters. She shouted, "They're as much mine as if I gave birth to them. Those two are my children." A correction motivated by pride in her daughters. A final answer to every doubt Nami had voiced. Blood does not define family. Money does not define worth. Love does. Nami tried to take back her words. She said she didn't mean it, that she hadn't meant wishing for rich parents. Bellamere apologized too, believing she had failed as a mother because she couldn't give them material comfort. This exchange, finally honest, finally resolved, came seconds too late. Genzo tried to intervene. When Nami screamed for help, he was cut down. When he rose again, he was struck again. And then Nami, having just lost Bellamere, begged him to stop because she could not endure more death. "Please, I don't want anyone else to get hurt." Bellamere's last words were simple. "I love you." And then her last lesson. Don't ever lose to anyone. Girls have to be strong too. And whatever happens, don't curse the age you were born into. Don't worry about what anyone else says. And whatever happens, never lose your ability to laugh. If you can survive, then happy times, lots of them, will come your way. After Bellamere is ruthlessly gunned down in the street in front of her daughters, Arlong branded Nami, forcing her to have the very moment her dreams shattered to be immortalized on her skin. The girl who once dreamt of mapping the entire world, fueled by a curiosity of the unknown, was now forced to plot graphs and chart territories intended for conquest and subjugation. Her passion tarnished and molded into what would reinforce her own prison. Her genius was transformed into the cruel reason her chains would never have been broken. After Bellamere's death, Arlong placed Nami in a position that cruelly inverted their previous conflict. He provided her with everything Bellamere could not: professional tools, books, instruments, unlimited materials. Under Arlong, Nami's dream was fully funded, yet this abundance was entirely devoid of affection, respect, or agency. Bellamere had called her kitten with affection. Arlong used that same word possessively. Where Bellamere's scarcity had been shaped by care, Arlong's abundance was merely shaped by ownership. Her labor was extracted under threat, her talent reduced to mere utility. The same resources she believed would validate her dream became instruments of her own imprisonment. This is the central irony of Nami's trauma. Bellamere had almost nothing materially, yet every limitation was shaped by care. Arlong had unlimited resources, yet every provision functioned as control. Through this contrast, Nami is forced to confront the cruelty of her own childhood words. She learns too late that material support without love is hollow, while love without means still retains moral weight. The abundance she once desired becomes inseparable from guilt, because it is obtained in the absence of the person who would have given it freely had she been able. The brand Arlong forces onto Nami's body literalizes this lesson. Her talent, once nurtured imperfectly but lovingly, is now permanently bound to exploitation. When Arlong presents her with the impossible bargain of 100 million berries in exchange for her village's freedom, money ceases to be a neutral tool and becomes Nami's moral anchor, a sum no child could ever hope to earn, a sum Arlong never even intended to honor. And so Nami made the heartbreaking revelation that hope was a luxury that she couldn't afford. And after that, every theft she committed, every lie she told, every smile she faked, was all part of her brutal calculations on how she would need to survive. Nami is a prisoner doing everything she can to buy time, buy freedom, and buy a miracle, something that she would eventually hold out long enough to see reach fruition. Nami is not motivated by greed. She is bolstered forth by retrospection. Her fixation on money is an attempt to reconcile an unresolved argument, to justify Bellamere's death, and to ensure that love will never again be defenseless. In this way, Arlong's captivity does not merely imprison Nami physically, but it also weaponizes her guilt, transforming money from a means of survival into a substitute for love itself. When Luffy enters Nami's life, she doesn't trust him. Why would she? He's a pirate after all, a creature cut from the same cloth as the monster who destroyed her home. She knows to keep her distance. Instead, she asserts the choice of distrust first. She manipulates him, tricks him, abandons the crew whenever she deems necessary. But there is something different about Luffy. A brightness, an innocence, a gravitational pull that she can't fully categorize nor dismiss. But what makes Luffy so different from the pirates she's accustomed to is that Luffy does not see people in terms of utility. He doesn't measure worth based on how useful someone is to him. He doesn't judge, pry, or demand. He moves through the world as if freedom is something that everyone deserves by default. For a girl whose life has been defined by ownership, that's just incomprehensible. Nami keeps her mask on, tight, careful, but every moment spent with the Straw Hat crew weakens it, because they never investigate her. They don't lecture her, don't question her, or even pry into her past. They simply accept her presence. But to Nami, acceptance is more dangerous than violence, because acceptance would mean that she could start to hope again. And hope is a wound she cannot afford to reopen. Nami's breaking point finally arrives at Arlong Park, the place where the world she'd spent 8 years painstakingly constructing collapses into ruin in an instant. From the age of 10, she crafted a fragile path toward freedom, built on sacrifice, manipulation, and a forced adulthood no child should have faced. For 8 years, she suffered in silence, shouldering the impossible hope that if she could just reach 100 million berries, her village, her family would be saved. But Arlong's betrayal shatters that hope. The deal she clung to was always a lie. Her sacrifices were never going to matter, and the Marines, the very people meant to stand for justice, accepted a simple bribe and walk away from their responsibility, choosing financial greed over their morality. The world that Nami was counting on to save her proves once again that it never intended to. The money she bled for, stole for, debased herself for, is taken from her without hesitation. Her dream, her freedom, her mother's legacy, all stolen within seconds. Nami wanders through Kokuyasu village like a ghost, numb, hollow, and spiritless. The villagers who have long understood the weight of her secret, too gentle, too knowing, refusing to acknowledge the wounds on her body or the deeper wounds they've always sensed in her heart. She returns their kindness with a familiar mask, a forced smile, and once again begs them not to fight. She insists their lives are worth more than her pride, but inside she is splintering. Her endurance is nearly exhausted. These are the same villagers that she endured enslavement for, the same villagers who once watched Bellamere choose death over denying the children that she loved. That tragedy taught Nami that love is worth dying for, but now, 8 years later, the villagers have made the opposite choice. They will not let the child Bellamere died for keep sacrificing herself. They could not choose how they lived under Arlong, but they will choose how they die. They march toward Arlong Park, armed with nothing but resolve, reclaiming their agency at last. Nami's refusal to accept help is rooted in her trauma. The last time someone stepped forward to protect her, Bellamere died. The last time someone resisted Arlong's tyranny, Genzo's face was violently sliced open, only being left alive since Arlong didn't want to lose out on precious berries he could wring out from each of his cash cows. His face scar would become a reminder of what happens to those who dare to defend her. The world has repeatedly taught Nami a devastating lesson. When people help her, they get hurt. So she learns to bear everything alone. She learns that depending on someone is dangerous. She learns that love, while precious, is lethal. That is why she pushes Luffy and the others away, dismissing their concern, rejecting their support, insisting she doesn't need them because she is terrified that if they fight for her, they will suffer the same fate Bellamere did. The thought of anyone else being hurt, killed, or scarred because of her is unbearable. Better she be hated, misunderstood, isolated, anything but responsible for another death. So when the Straw Hats try to intervene, she resists them, and pushes them away at every opportunity. But even with all her walls, all her masks, the truth becomes too heavy to suppress. Every lesson in helplessness converges at once. Genzo's scar is a constant reminder that humans cannot win against Arlong and his crew. She has lived her life believing that she must never cry, must never rely on anyone, must never ask for help, promising herself, "I'm not gonna cry anymore. I've decided to fight alone." For 8 years she never shed a tear. She bore pain silently so no one else would suffer for her. Now the lies, the weight, the hopelessness reach an unbearable peak. She wants Arlong dead. She wants the nightmare to end. But she knows she cannot defeat him. None of them can. In this world ruled by power, those born without it are condemned to live and die by the whims of the strong. Even Arlong's so-called deals are nothing but a web of semantics, loopholes and deceit. Technically, he didn't break his promise, but in truth he has always been a coward, a tyrant hiding behind technicalities while crushing anyone beneath him who dared to dream. And so Nami snaps. Her knife cannot pierce Arlong's skin, but it can pierce hers. In a moment of pure desperation, she drives the blade over and over again into the tattoo that marks her as Arlong's property. With no regard for erasing the ink, merely obsessed with erasing that identity, the brand that stole her childhood, her freedom, her mother, her home. Her voice is ragged, her breath shakes, her tears fall freely for the first time in 8 years, and then battered by despair, with nowhere left to turn to, and no strength left to pretend, she collapses. The mask falls away. Her pride breaks. And finally she speaks the words she once believed she would never be allowed to say. Help me. 2 words heavy with 8 years of pain, shame, and isolation. 2 words she believed that would get someone else killed if she dared to utter them. 2 words that admit she cannot survive alone anymore. It is the most vulnerable moment in early One Piece, and Luffy understands instantly. He initially says nothing because nothing needs to be said. Instead, he places his treasured straw hat, the symbol of his dream and very identity, onto her head. It is the gentlest declaration he could make. Your pain, your freedom, matters. You are not alone anymore. Nami's liberation is finally set in motion. The walk to Arlong Park is a march towards reclaiming her life, her family, and her future. Luffy and the crew fight for her not because she's useful, convenient, or indebted to them, only that she asked for their help and they care about her deeply. Bellamere once told her, if you can survive, happy times will come your way. Nami survived long enough for those words to finally come true. She held out long enough for her hero. This is the turning point, the moment when Nami stops just surviving and starts living her life, surrounded by others. Luffy walks to Arlong Park with a calmness more terrifying than blind rage. There is no bravado, posturing, monologue, or even a speech about dreams and ideals. Just purpose. He walks with the certainty of a man who has made a vow to free someone who cannot free themselves. Luffy has fought many enemies before Arlong, but this is the first villain because someone cried for help. The Arlong Park walk is famously brilliant because it is the embodiment of Luffy's ideology, that oppression is always unacceptable, freedom is sacred, and when the oppressed call for aid, he will always answer. No questions, no judgment, no hesitation. In that walk, Luffy appears to be so much more than an optimistic boy chasing a dream, as he becomes her liberator, her hero. He becomes the person that the world of One Piece desperately needs, yet never receives. Someone who sees the injustice and acts on it. When we meet Arlong on the first read-through, he is seemingly just a monster who terrorized an unfortunate village, but in truth he is the product of a world that has taught him the language of domination long before he wielded it himself. To understand why Nami's liberation has weight, we first need to understand what Arlong believes. Arlong's ideology is built on a brutal misreading of history. As a fishman, he inherits generational trauma born from centuries of human cruelty, enslavement, segregation, and systemic violence that relegated his people to margins of the world. The fishermen were denied dignity, treated as lesser beings and brutalized under the same hierarchical logic that governs much of the One Piece world. Arlong internalized this truth early. Power decides who lives freely, and who doesn't. But where characters like Fisher Tiger sought liberation through collective freedom and moral rupture, Arlong chose inversion instead. He did not reject the system that dehumanized him, he embraced it. He merely flipped the hierarchy. In Arlong's worldview, oppression is not evil, it is natural. Someone must dominate. And if history is decreed that humans once stood above fishmen, then Arlong believes destiny now demands reversal. This is why Arlong's cruelty is deliberate and rationalized. He does not see himself as a villain, he sees himself as a realist. His domination of Kokuyashi village is framed in his mind as proof of inevitability. The weak exist to serve the strong, and that freedom is something distributed by those powerful enough to enforce it. Nami becomes central to this worldview. She is not enslaved just because she is weak, but because she is useful to him. Her brilliance validates Arlong's ideology. Her suffering is, to him, evidence that humans are best utilized as tools rather than equals. By calling her kitten, Arlong reduces her from personhood to property, mirroring the precise language once used against his own people. This is the tragedy of Arlong. He reproduces the very logic that oppresses him and his own people. His deal with Nami is not a genuine bargain, and is just a rhetorical trap. The promise of freedom through payment reflects the same moral corruption that underpins slavery itself. The idea that liberty can be earned through suffering, quantified through labor, and revoked through technicalities. Arlong's reliance on loopholes reveals his cowardice. He cloaks tyranny in legality because legality absolves him of accountability and guilt. In this way, Arlong doubles as Nami's enslaver and the living system of oppression. He embodies the world's deepest lie, that freedom is conditional, hierarchical, and transactional. This is why Luffy could never negotiate with him. Arlong is terrifying because he believes he is right, and in that belief, not his strength, that is what must be destroyed. What makes the Luffy vs Arlong fight so powerful is that it evolves tonally, thematically, and emotionally, right alongside Luffy's own understanding of what's actually at stake. It begins deceptively light, even silly, before crystallizing into one of the clearest ideological statements One Piece has ever made about freedom. At first, the fight plays like classic slapstick. Luffy is dragged underwater, his neck stretched out of the water so that he can breathe while everyone panics, and Arlong mocks him for being helpless. There's a ridiculous, almost Looney Tunes energy to it. Even when Luffy regains his footing, the combat is full of exaggerated moves, taunts, and back and forth exchanges that feel more playful than lethal. Luffy is fundamentally a fighter who laughs. As the inheritor of Joy Boy's will, and later revealed as the embodiment of Nika, he fights with joy, elasticity, and absurdity. He refuses to meet tyranny on its own terms. Arlong wants domination, fear, and hierarchy. Luffy responds with laughter and refusal. At this stage, Arlong is just another bad guy to knock down. But Luffy hasn't seen Nami's suffering yet. Luffy doesn't understand maps. He doesn't care about navigation, geography, or precision. But he understands pain. And he understands cages. He understands when someone's life has been reduced to labor for someone else's dream. And he looks around the room. He doesn't see Arlong's ambition, just Nami's imprisonment. 8 years of forced obedience are carved into those walls. Every map is a tally mark of stolen time. The blood-stained pen is the most devastating detail of all. Proof that this was accomplished through suffering. That Nami's body and spirit were consumed to fuel Arlong's worldview. She wasn't a partner or even a subordinate, just the tool. Something to be used. Merely addressed as a kitten, a pet. And that is unforgivable to Luffy. Luffy doesn't argue with him. There is no negotiation for Nami's release. He just erases the prison entirely. Luffy frees Nami by destroying the system that justified those chains in the first place. The cartography room is Arlong's pride, the physical manifestation of his power and long-term plan to conquer the seas. To Arlong, these maps represent inevitability, the proof that humans are inferior and that fishmen are destined to rule as the superior species. To Luffy, they represent the theft of choice. So he smashes everything. Maps, desks, tools, walls. He doesn't preserve a single artifact. He doesn't allow even the idea of that room to survive. This is Luffy's philosophy in action. If a structure exists solely to crush someone's freedom, it doesn't deserve reform, merely annihilation. Arlong's greatest sin is not his racism, cruelty, or even rampant violence. It's his belief that he has the right to own someone else's future. He decides Nami's role, her value, her lifespan, and her usefulness. He frames her suffering as necessary, even benevolent. Luffy rejects this worldview completely. To Luffy, freedom is not something earned through labor or debt. Freedom cannot be conditional. It is not something one person grants another. Freedom is innate and inherent, and anyone who tries to claim ownership over another human being becomes his enemy. When Luffy finally defeats Arlong, it is undeniably triumphant. While there is no gloating, no declaration of dominance, there's finally an air of relief. The kind that comes when something deeply wrong has finally been set right. Luffy doesn't take Arlong Park as his territory, nor does he replace Arlong as the ruler. He doesn't claim victory in that traditional pirate sense. He leaves it behind in ruins, because Luffy, like Goldie Roger and Joy Boy before him, doesn't seek dominion. Any influence he gains is incidental, born from the wake of liberation. He destroys cages and walks away, trusting people to rebuild their lives on their own terms. In freeing Nami, Luffy doesn't bestow upon her a changed dream to chase. It stays the exact same, but now she has been given the space to make her own choice. Space to choose. Space to laugh again. Space for her dream to finally breathe. The Arlong fight is where One Piece becomes a manifesto of sorts. It declares that no one should be owned. No dream should be built on another person's suffering. No system that erases choice deserves to stand. Luffy laughs when he fights, but when he sees injustice clearly, his laughter sharpens into resolve. In that cartography room, he destroys the very idea she was ever meant to be a prisoner. And that is Luffy at his purest. A liberator who fights with joy, a warrior who laughs until freedom is threatened, and a captain who will tear the world apart so his friends can choose how to live in it. When Nami returns to her village after Arlong's defeat, she smiles. Not the brittle smile she wore to survive, not the sharp smile she used to deceive, but a soft, unguarded smile, the kind that doesn't hide anything. For the first time, we see Nami as she truly is. Just Nami, a navigator with a dream, a girl who is finally free. The celebration swells around the village, but the moment that matters is small. Nami turns towards Luffy as someone in control of her future. She wants to sail with him. Luffy looks at her and says it plainly. Nami, you're one of us now. There is no hierarchy in his voice, no implication of possession or a hidden condition attached, just the gesture itself. Nami answers with a nod and a soft and tearful, that's all. But in that moment, everything changes, because Arlong called her a possession, something owned, something used. Luffy calls her a crewmate, an equal. She doesn't have to prove her worth. She doesn't have to earn her place. She doesn't have to be useful to be allowed to stay. She is chosen because she chooses. Her tears aren't falling from grief anymore because she's finally able to bask in the comfort of relief. The kind that comes when loneliness finally ends. When someone sees you, not for what you can do, but for who you are, and says you belong. The villagers laugh and cry with her because the future is finally open. This is the moment Nami truly joins the Straw Hats as a part of their found family. Nami's liberation is a combination of multiple freedoms. Physical freedom. The chains of Arlong are broken. Her village is safe. Her body is her own once again. Emotional freedom. She can trust again. She can cry without shame. She can love without fear of loss. Identity freedom. Her cartography is no longer a weapon used against humanity, as it becomes a gift to the crew, illuminating a new path forward. Freedom to dream. Her childhood dream of mapping the globe becomes a real possibility again. Communal freedom. Her village's liberation mirrors her own. Everybody rises with her. But the most important freedom of all, freedom from loneliness. Because captivity can extend its reach beyond the physical and invade the emotional, the psychological, the existential. And Luffy gives her freedom from all three. Each freedom carries residue. Trust does not erase fear. Dreams do not undo trauma. But freedom allows these wounds to exist without ownership. After Arlong Park, Nami grows in ways both subtle and profound. She laughs more easily. She teases more playfully. She relies on others without guilt. Her intelligence becomes a source of pride rather than shame. Her maps can finally flourish as expansive works of art, rather than stunted shackles that would define her imprisonment. Her navigation becomes the guiding light of the entire crew. When she stands at the helm of the Going Merry, hair majestically blowing in the wind, eyes scanning the horizon, she's finally exhibiting real joy. The joy of someone finally doing what they love without restraint. For herself, for her family, for her dream. Her tattoo is overwritten, a symbol of the pain she survived, but also of the love that replaced it. Her new tattoo is a reminder that trauma shapes you, but it does not define you. Not if you have people who choose you anyway. And the Straw Hats choose Nami every time. Nami's story is a microcosm of One Piece's themes. Freedom is the ultimate treasure. Nami's liberation is a reminder that freedom is deeply personal. Found family over blood. Luffy and the crew become the family she thought she had lost forever. Dreams as the essence of life. Her dream is not childish, it is sacred, and it has motivated everything up to this point. Joy is rebellion. Nami's laughter is a defiant act against the darkness that once consumed her. A broken world can still change. Arlong Park is a testament to cruelty, but it doubles as a testament to hope as well. Nami's story delves into the truth that sometimes, even the toughest nuts to crack need help. Her cry for Luffy's help was incredibly important, because she was able to seek help outside of her own means. She would finally put her trust in another, even if it meant he could get hurt. But she believes in him, in that tenacious smile. It took courage, real courage, in the face of terrifying odds with her world collapsing around her. But that belief in her friends, and in Luffy, that they were able to win the day. Nami's story is a vessel through which Oda teaches us a profound lesson in his ethics prevalent in One Piece. More so than the absence of chains, freedom is the presence of hope, and that hope is born through connection. Luffy didn't save Nami because she was useful, strong, or clever. She's not someone or something to be used. He saved her because she deserved to be free. There is no context nor further reasoning necessary to justify one's right to liberty. In saving her, he set a precedent for Robin, for Chopper, for Frankie, for Jinbei, for every oppressed soul that the Straw Hats would encounter. Nami is the second Straw Hat liberated in One Piece. Another person who shows us what it means when Luffy fights for someone else's freedom. Her smile, her true smile, is the treasure of Arlong Park. A treasure more valuable than gold, riches, a treasure that proves the power of kindness in a cruel world. And so her story becomes the first map of the heart of One Piece, a map drawn with tears, dreams, and laughter. A map that shows us the shape of freedom, and that the journey has only just begun.